This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and if you clicked on this video, you're probably a pretty serious whiskey enthusiast, because today we're talking about this Elements of Islay independently bottled, peated, 8+ year Bunnahabhain. It's a USA exclusive bottling. It's pretty niche, but in addition to unpacking this unique bottling and presentation of this whiskey, I really want to kind of unpack what is coming through and what is added from this very small batch, independently bottled presentation of peated Bunnahabhain versus the peated Bunnahabhain the distillery puts out. Let's get into it. My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here, with you, on Whiskey Whereabouts. So if you're not already familiar, Elements of Islay is a series of independently bottled Islay whiskeys from Elixir, the independent bottler behind Port of Skeg, which is also Islay Scotch whiskey. They have independent bottlings of other Scotch whiskeys, other spirits. They own 2 distilleries, Tormore and Speyside, and the Port Truin distillery coming soon, supposed to be coming online in 2025 on Islay. And this is a pretty clever, concept. They had these like periodic table of elements style presentation. So each of the distilleries has its own abbreviation, so you know what it is, although it doesn't just say Bunnahabhain. So the BN is Bunnahabhain, and they had a series. So they have the little numbers to identify which one. And they used to do these for various different distilleries, and they stopped doing that. And maybe that's part of the shift that I've talked about on the channel before. If you haven't seen my video talking about independent bottlers and sort of an intro and the status of some of them opening up their own distilleries, I put the link up here. Here we have one of these bottlers who's done just that with 2 distilleries. Maybe they just want to streamline the line, but now they have 3 bottles in their Elements of Islay range. So now they have this color-coded system, which has worked otherwise in Scotch whiskey in the past, right? The green is the 46% whiskey, there's a red, there's a sherry, and then the blue is the higher ABV, it's 54.5%. Bottling in the last year was 2022 of these distillery-specific bottlings, and that's what we have here. So let's get a little bit more into the details here. As I was saying before, it was distilled in 2013. It was bottled in 2022, so it's 8+ years, and it's only 732 bottles out of 3 bourbon casks. It was USA exclusive, like I mentioned, and it is signed by Oliver Chilton, the master blender of the series. So pretty intriguing provenance, and this was a bottle that usually was going for like $130 or so, and I found this on sale. I was traveling, I was out of town, and I was in Houston, Texas, where I found that the whiskey shops have some pretty good prices relative to what I expect, and this bottle, being probably an older bottle, was no different. $67 I paid for this bottle, so had to pull the trigger at half price, right? And wanted to definitely share it with you. So when I taste Bunnahabhain on the channel, I usually have it in my copita that I brought back from warehouse number 9 on the island, where this whiskey did not spend any time. It likely was aged elsewhere, but it was distilled at Bunnahabhain, and again, peated. Bunnahabhain. By default, the Bunnahabhain in the core range is not peated, but we have the peated variants from the distillery, and now we have some independently bottled, and I am going to go in neat on the nose with plenty of time for this to open up. So yeah, I've been on a bit of a journey since the neck pour. You see where the level is. I'm here, been dipping into this one, and the peat is pretty present, but the smoke, it is that sort of campfire kind of Islay peated smoke, but it's kind of a low sort of simmer, dry. But at the same time, there's this sort of peaty, very earthy. It's taken on a medicinal quality. It wasn't really there from the beginning. There's been a journey with the vanilla, which is really probably one of the 2 prominent flavor notes. Vanilla and tart green apple. I'm getting a lot of vanilla bean on that neck pour, and now it's kind of sweetened, I think, a little bit. It's opened up to like vanilla custard. There's also some additional elements that kind of unlocked as it has opened up, yeah, there's almost like a little polished brass note, and there's something, it's kind of in keeping with that low, simmery kind of fire, sort of ash particles, but there's something almost dusty, like a dusty sort of library element. There's another angle here. It's sort of green and vegetal at first, and then it kind of develops a little bit more sour, almost like Bruichladdich-like. And it's pretty buried in the mix in a good way, kind of offsetting some of that sweetness. There's saltiness, but the vanilla never goes full caramel with it. It's a very solid nose, and for cask strength, younger than 10 years, it's very approachable. This does not come off as hot. I would maybe be fooled in a blind flight that this one was not over 50%. But let's see about the palate. Still not really hot on the palate. There's that salted caramel, sweet. That's taken place of the vanilla. It's also almost like a dark chocolate powder or shavings. There's a berry to it, and the peat really blossomed. The fire has somebody's thrown some more wood on the fire. It has kind of roared a little. We're getting the ash kind of in the sinus. We're getting the ash on the tongue, the smoke. There's no question. You've got a nice big Islay peated whiskey here on that palate. Like I said, that fruit has gone a little condensed. There's always been a tartness. Now it's almost like a berry more than that sort of orchardy apple. Let's do the finish. There's 55%. It shows up in the finish. It's not overwhelming, but I've got the warming right now going down through my chest while I'm talking to you. Really announces itself. Big, huge peat smoke presence. This is not a subtle Islay peated whiskey. In flavor-wise, still have that sort of through line of that vanilla, but I'm getting a sour fruit now. The fruit has gone pretty sour. It's not overwhelming and it's not out of balance. So it's nice to get a little bit of a progression. I think at each stage that fruit note has manifested a little bit differently. And after the fact, I will say that over time with each of the pours, I think it's gotten a little bit more medicinal, especially here in the finish. Just your tongue feels like it's covered in ash. There's some cask there. But what I'm left with is kind of a little bit of that tinge, that medicinal, and then a kind of almost a licorice anise or what presence kind of in the sinus after the finish is really, which is so long, has really played out. This is a very, it's not one that's going to sneak up on you. The signs are all there, but it really, it's not like Lagavulin 16 where you're kind of going along and then you get that huge wave on the finish. Here, it's sort of ramping up each stage, but the finish really leaves you with a pretty serious Islay whiskey punch. But we got 50, almost 5% whiskey, and we have a pretty sort of varied list of flavors from the different parts of the wheel. So this one, this glass is actually helpfully marked, as it has a line that says where 25 mils is. So it's about 15, I think, and that's about where I'm usually at. I'm gonna give this a little water because I'm gonna see what happens at finish I'm really interested in and what other flavors I might find. And what a difference. This is why I do this. The smoke's really been washed out. What was there? Remember, it was a little subtle, neat, really been washed away. And what I've got in its place is the sweetness is gone, very chocolate, cocoa powder, but I've got some new elements here. One of them is like a pencil shaving. Yeah, there's orange now, and I would say, and I said this before, there's a sourness coming through at one point, a kind of almost Bruichladdich sour, lactic. Yeah, there is almost a cheese kind of element here on the nose with the water. It is much less round, and I wouldn't say it's as inviting, but we're sort of unpacking some of these more subtle components here with the water on the palate, really condensing that chocolate. There's a vegetal green sort of element again. It's oakier, caskier, kind of oak spice. On the finish, really muted now. Really calmed that finish way down. It's not really brought anything else in. Again, the sweet's gone chocolate. I've got that ash, got that still that smoke in the sinus. Certainly sippable, certainly drinkable. You might want it on that finish, just a little bit of water just to kind of chill that out, but it really has kind of turned the flavor upside down, especially in the first 2 stages. So this is a pretty formidable whiskey. If this were a core range whiskey, I think it would be one to be reckoned with if it was a sort of a non-age stated, peated Bunnahabhain. Speaking of which, I'm interested in what is and is not present in this whiskey versus this one. Now, it's not a 1-for-1 because this is only 46 and the sort of classic 46.3% presentation, and it is sherry and bourbon matured. And this is matured in 3 bourbon casks. So it's not a 1-for-1, but this is the peated Bunnahabhain that I have. With the 2 of these, there's really no point. It's obvious which one is which. So I've left them in the glasses where you can see the color and how much darker. Neither of these whiskeys has color. This is a non-age stated whiskey, maybe younger, but so much darker when you sit it next to the purely bourbon cask. We don't know what fill or anything. And this is a fresh pour, not the water pour of the elements of Islay Bunnahabhain. So just nosing on this whiskey from the distillery. Yeah, and I'm picking something up once I can get past the sherry. Sherry's overwhelming. So much sherry when you go from one to the other. But they have that sort of quality in common. The smoke is pretty subtle on that first sort of nose. But there is that kind of almost... At times I called it kind of library dusty. Sometimes I said pencil shavings with the water. That element is definitely there in both. This one obviously has a lot of the sherry sweetness, a lot of the sherry fruit is right up front. And on the palate, it drinks so much easier. You know, almost 10 points. And it's so much sherry when you compare. I would say that the smoke, the peat, is even more subtle here on the palate than it was here. And here with these bourbon cask presentation, you're really getting to let that fire burn. Once you get that palate going on the smoke, the ash from the peat. On the finish, this one's clearly bigger, it's clearly hotter, but this one's a little bit more almost abrasive, despite the lower ABV. I assume it's younger, and we are getting a lot of sort of chocolate kind of sweetness across this, despite the difference between the sherry and the bourbon casks. You're getting the most heat, the most peat, so there's clearly a sort of commonality, despite the really different presentations from these two. What does this suggest to me? This simple bourbon cask presentation is really showcasing the peat, but also it's allowing a lot of space for some of those more exotic elements that I was talking about. Neat, and then obviously once we hit it with the water, we got some really different notes. But there's space for that to kind of shine through here with this presentation. And remember, it's only 3 casks, so it's not some huge vatting that the blender is adding and subtracting and calibrating. So you're getting a real straightforward presentation. I think that's really where we get some value beyond just the availability of quality whiskey. So, you know, independently bottled Kalila almost never misses, right? That spirit is so reliable. Bunnahabhain, I found. Independent Bunnahabhain, I've never been disappointed by it. And it's just a really solid spirit that has versatility with these different bottlings, different presentations. But here, when we have a sort of stripped down, this really feels like a pretty big presentation, but also a very simple, almost like an acoustic set for the spirit, really showcasing it And I think there's some real value in that. In addition to, sometimes you get these independent bottlings, you can get a value, especially when you're talking about Caol versus the Diageo presentation. Sometimes you're going to pay a premium. And that's certainly the case here with less than 10-year PEATED Bunnahabhain was asking for cask strength, $130. Cask strength Bunnahabhain 12-year doesn't cost that much. So here we're having a little bit of a premium, so it's not an alternative for price, but what you are able to see is to see it in a different presentation. And for me, kind of going back and forth, even though this is not a great sort of comparison. A better comparison would be if there was some sherry in here, and if we had a little bit lower ABV, we'd really be able to start picking apart. So where does that leave us with this elements of Islay? I think it is, I prefer it to this, and is that a shock? I mean, it costs twice as much almost retail back when it was on the market, but also the high ABV. I like having some space to pick apart those exotic flavors. I think it's a very solid 4-glass whiskey for what it's worth. There's not very much of this available, but just as a sort of a comparison, a baseline. I'm not going to do value because it's not on the market anymore. I paid, a very reasonable price given that it's not, being marketed anymore. And if I had paid the $130 asking price for this, it would have a deduction. It's not worth that, just in the glass. But I'm just going to leave it because it's kind of moot. It's not really on the shelves anymore. So I'm just going to say 4 glasses for this whiskey. And I hope you enjoyed this sort of comparison tasting here, picking apart PEATED Bunnahabhain, which is a little bit sort of off the beaten path. You can get plenty of the official bottlings, but it's not the sort of age-stated core range staple. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos that are coming, and I will see you on the next one.